life can occasionally toss us curveballs that completely upend our reality. Everything appears to be under control and predictable one minute, and then you find yourself in a scenario you never would have thought of. When my mother-in-law, Carol, came to spend a few weeks with us, I felt just that way. My name is Ryan. I'm a 35-year-old accountant, and my wife, Sarah, and our 2 children reside in a peaceful suburb. I have always thought of myself as a family man, loyal, trustworthy, and most importantly, respectful. However, after Carol moved in, things began to change in a way that I was unable to fully explain. Carol had just gotten out of a difficult divorce. She was having a hard time getting back on her feet after a heartbreaking 25-year marriage. Being the helpful daughter that she is, my wife Sarah proposed that Carol remain with us for a bit until she recovered.
I didn't object.
It felt like the correct thing to do, because Carol was family. However, I couldn't help but notice the tension that pervaded the room as soon as she entered. Carol had always been the glitzy kind, attractive, well-groomed, and endowed with a grin that could brighten any space. Something about her had changed, though. She appeared more vigilant, more vulnerable. I initially believed it to be my imagination. I reassured myself that she was just getting used to her new life and taking solace in her family's familiarity. However, I soon began to notice small details. Her eyes would follow me throughout the house, and it started with lingering looks. Then there were the inconspicuous touches that seemed a little too familiar, like a hand on my arm or a shoulder squeeze. Since Carol was going through a lot, I dismissed it as her just being loving. However, the longer it went on, the more I sensed that something was wrong. Carol and I were left alone with the children one evening when Sarah had to leave for work late. Carol and I sat down with a glass of wine in the living room after putting children to bed. We discussed her divorce and how difficult it was for her to leave behind the life she had known for so long. She spoke honestly and candidly, with a hint of melancholy. I listened and tried to console her as best I could, but I couldn't get rid of the thought that she could have more to say. Carol's tone shifted when the discussion veered off topic. She began about Sarah and how she had always valued our relationship. She looked directly into my eyes and said, "You know, Ryan, you're a good man. You are a blessing to Sarah. I only wish I had a companion like you." A knot formed in my stomach as her words lingered in the air, laden with significance. I tried to refocus the topic by saying, "Carol, you're going to find someone great." She ignored the hint, though. With a gentle, almost melancholic tone, she trailed off. "You know, sometimes I wonder." She seemed to be considering whether or not to go on, and I could see the turmoil in her eyes. "I wonder what being with someone like you would be like." The remarks were like a kick to the stomach. My mind was spinning trying to comprehend what she had just said, and I wasn't sure how to react. I got up, muttered something about having to see how the children were doing, and hurried out of the room. My mind was a confused mess, and my heart was racing. I was aware that I needed to establish limits and make it obvious that whatever was occurring had to end before it could get any worse. However, I couldn't stop thinking about her remarks as I laid in bed that night. I made an effort to behave normally the following morning, concentrating on my work and avoiding any pointless conversation with Carol. She persisted, though. She always found a cause to be close to me during the day, whether it was to offer me coffee, ask for assistance with anything unimportant, or just to talk about unimportant topics. Every time, I had the same pull, that same magnetic force, that I knew was harmful, yet was unable to completely ignore. Sarah continued to be blissfully ignorant, preoccupied with her work and the children. Between my devotion to her and the conflicting feelings Carol evoked in me, I felt bad. I needed to talk to Carol to make things right since I knew I couldn't let this go on. However, each time I looked for the ideal opportunity, I backed off out of fear of making things even more awkward. Carol cornered me in the kitchen one evening after Sarah had taken the kids to a friend's birthday celebration. This time, I knew there was no getting away from her piercing gaze as she leaned on the counter. "Ryan, we need to talk," she murmured, her eyes revealing the agony she was experiencing but her voice firm. I tried to seem calm as I added, "Carol, I don't think this is a good idea." However, she moved in closer, her hand extending to meet mine. "Just listen, please," she begged. I can't control how I feel, even though I know this is terrible. You are all I've ever desired, and all I've never had. I need you to know that I care about you, Sarah, even if I'm not asking you to go. Profoundly. With the weight of her confession bearing down on me like a ton of bricks, I withdrew my hand. This is impossible, Carol, I firmly stated. Your daughter and I are married. I would never do anything to harm Sarah, since I adore her. Carol turned aside, her shoulders trembling as tears filled her eyes. Despite my remorse, I knew I had to maintain my composure. This was about protecting my family and doing the right thing even when it was difficult, not simply about me. I apologize, I whispered softly as I retreated from the kitchen. I could hear her quiet tears as I was leaving, and it took all of my might not to turn around. In an attempt to block out the sound of her sobbing, I went upstairs and locked myself in the bedroom. Even though I knew I had made the correct decision, it didn't make things any simpler. The next few days were stressful. Carol stayed away, and I made an effort to concentrate on my family and act as though nothing was wrong. However, neither of us was able to ignore the tension that existed between us without expressing it. I was always on edge because I was afraid Sarah would sense the tension and ask me questions I wasn't ready to respond to. Carol came up to me in the living room one afternoon when Sarah was at work and the children were at school. Although she appeared more collected, a grief that had not previously been present was visible in her eyes. I apologize, Ryan, she whispered quietly. Those were inappropriate things for me to say. I was just confused and lonely. You and Sarah are in love, and I would never want to get in the way of that. Relieved that she was now recognizing the necessity for a boundary, I nodded. Don't worry, Carol. I understand. However, we must maintain perspective. This can never be anything more than our familial bond. She wiped away a tear and nodded. I understand. To get it off my chest, I simply had to say it. I won't be in your way for very long, because I'll be seeking for a place of my own. I was both relieved and saddened. Although I knew it was best for her, I didn't want her to go on a poor note. Carol started packing her belongings over the course of the following several days in anticipation of moving into a modest apartment close by. I felt as though I could finally breathe again as the atmosphere in the house gradually subsided. I was relieved that we had been able to contain the issue without doing any more damage, and Sarah saw that her mother appeared happier and more at ease. Carol gave me a farewell hug the day she departed, her smile sincere but with a hint of melancholy. I'm grateful, Ryan, she muttered. For everything. I'm happy that we can still be family, but I apologize if I caused any trouble. Always, Carol. I smiled reassuringly at her. Seeing her drive off gave me a sense of closure, like if a chapter in my life had ended. I was okay with my decision, even though I knew that a part of me would always wonder what might have been. What mattered most in the end was my marriage and my family, which I had chosen. Slowly, things got back to normal. Together, Sarah and I kept constructing our life, concentrating on our children and our future. Carol maintained contact, paying frequent visits while maintaining a polite distance. I was happy to let it stay that way, and we never discussed what had transpired between us. It was a recollection of a time that had tried me but, in the end, strengthened me. I thought back on what I had discovered as the months went by. I came to understand that temptation can take many different shapes and that it can occasionally seem as something unexpected or familiar. But you always have a choice, regardless of how powerful the draw is. You have two options: fight for what's right or give in. I decided to fight. For my spouse, my children, and the life we had created together. And that ultimately made the difference. Like everyone else, I was aware of my imperfections and shortcomings. However, I was also confident in my ability to act morally even in the face of difficulty. And I understood that was my strength. My experience serves as a reminder that our internal struggles might occasionally be the most difficult ones we encounter. When things get difficult, it's simple to give in to temptation and go off course. However, during those times, it's critical to keep in mind what is genuinely valuable and worthy of being fought for. Fortunately, I managed to find my way back before I lost sight of that. I now feel a great sense of thankfulness every time I see Sarah and our children. I'm grateful for our life together, our shared affection, and the lessons I've picked up along the road. I've learned that family is about more than simply blood. It's also about the decisions we make, the dedication we have to one another, and the fortitude to remain loyal to the people we love. I realize I've made mistakes as I sit here thinking back on all that has transpired. However, I am also aware of my own growth and my newfound appreciation for what matters most. And I'm thankful for that. Ultimately, what matters are the choices we make in the face of temptation, not the temptations themselves. I am also proud of the decisions I have taken and the family I have decided to keep safe. If you ever find yourself in a similar circumstance, keep in mind to stand back and consider what is most important. It's simple to become engrossed in the now, but remember what matters most. Remain loyal to your principles, your promises, and the people you depend on. Because those are ultimately what make us who we are, what give our life significance and direction. I appreciate you hearing my tale. I hope it serves as a reminder that the correct route is always worthwhile, regardless of how alluring the road may appear. Always pick what's best for you and your loved ones, and be strong and loyal to yourself.